She got into the car wearing a stunning dress, all excited for her first date. She said she'd finally met a different guy, polite, mysterious, and with the same name as me. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. But then she started sharing details about his profile, the phrases he used, even the restaurant where they were meeting. Every word felt like she was describing me. And that's when I got butterflies in my stomach. Because halfway through the ride, she stopped talking, looked at me in the rearview mirror, and asked, "Wait, are you Jake from the app?" If you've ever had a weird encounter, wait until you hear this one. Like it, subscribe to Backseat Secrets, and stay until the end, because what happened next was even more unbelievable. My name is Jake. I'm 34 years old, I live in Austin, Texas, and I've been driving for a ride-hailing app for a good 3 years. I work more at night not only because there's less traffic, but because I'm naturally a night owl. I've always enjoyed the silence of the early morning hours, the calmer atmosphere on the streets after 10. Well, calm to a certain extent. Because anyone who drives at night knows that, every now and then, the app decides to put you in the middle of a Mexican soap opera with an indie film soundtrack. I tend to get longer rides, especially on weekends. People returning from bars, going on dates, going to clubs, or escaping from dates gone wrong, I've seen it all. Some passengers get on mute and leave silent. Some passengers get on talking and keep talking even after they've left. But that night it was different. It was Saturday, around 7:30 p.m. The sky was already darkening, but the city still had that early evening energy. The app pinged, and the ride appeared. Passenger's name, Megan, destination, Italian restaurant downtown. 18-minute ride. No problem. I accepted. She had 5 stars on her profile and a thank you note from another driver that said, "Super polite passenger, great conversation." Great. I was expecting a smooth ride, maybe with some light conversation. But when I pulled up in front of the address and saw Megan leaving her house, I realized this ride wasn't going to be as typical as I'd thought. She stepped out in a long wine-colored dress, high heels, perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, and a smile that looked rehearsed. And I mean that in the best possible way. This woman was feeling wonderful and made it clear that her night had one mission: to impress someone. When she opened the car door and got into the back seat, she was immediately friendly. "Good evening, how are you?" I answered yes, and she added, "Today is my first date in months. And I think I finally got it right. He seems different. Serious, cultured, mysterious." He paused dramatically and added, "And his name is Jake. Just like yours. What a coincidence, right?" I laughed and replied, "Look, if he has half my good taste in music, you're set." She laughed too. And then the conversation began. And the more she talked, the more I began to get uncomfortably curious. At first, I still thought it was all just a funny coincidence. After all, Jake isn't exactly a rare name in the United States. But then she started to elaborate. Megan told me she met Jake through the Connect Me app, one of those dating apps a lot of people use these days. And guess who also has a profile there? Same name. No photo. And a rather peculiar bio. "He's different," she said. His bio caught my attention. He wrote that he likes silence, people watching, and that he prefers texting to calling. My stomach churned. Because I swear that was exactly my text. Word for word. That part about people watching was a discreet reference to my addiction to documentaries about human behavior. And the silence was just a polite way of saying I hate noisy people. No big deal. But it wasn't something common. It wasn't an artificial intelligence text. It was something very much my own. She continued, and he said he preferred low-key dates, simple dinners, and that he didn't post photos by choice. I found it so mysterious. By this point, I was already sweating inside. Because the mysterious Jake's Connect Me profile was starting to sound a lot like me. But even so, I tried to convince myself it could be a coincidence. So many people with the same name, maybe another Jake also liked silence, documentaries, and Italian dinners. Who knows? But the universe seemed determined to prove me wrong. And the next thing she said, she practically gave me away. The conversation was getting weirder and weirder, but at the same time, funny. I tried to look away, pretending I was completely calm. But I was tense. Every word she said seemed to confirm that the coincidence was no longer just a joke, it was a sign. And a big one. She started talking about their conversation on the app. How Jake had been super mysterious, and she loved that air of enigma. She even joked that she matched with him because he'd left his profile picture blank, as if it were a metaphor for his personality. I found it so intriguing, how he didn't want to post a photo. It was like a game, you know? You keep wondering what he's really like. She paused, looking at me in the rearview mirror with a nervous smile. I knew he was the one, Jake. The mystery, the calm. She was laughing now, as if she'd come to a very obvious conclusion. I could almost hear her mental click. And then she dropped the bombshell. And I only realized now, the name, the style, the silence. It's him, isn't it? She said it with such confidence that even I was left wondering. What was that? Had the woman just realized? Well, I shook my head, trying to deflect. Oh no. I think there are a lot of Jakes out there. Just a coincidence. But it wasn't a coincidence. She laughed nervously in disbelief. Oh, I really fell for that, didn't I? The Jake I looked for, the mysterious one, the one who loves silence, and you, sitting here in my car. Only with the difference that I didn't see your picture. How ironic. I was starting to think I wasn't driving the race anymore. I was driving my own romantic nightmare. I tried to mask my discomfort with a smile. I made that classic comment of someone trying to keep the mood light. Looks like Jake has good taste. She laughed, amused by the coincidence. But I noticed her laugh was shorter. She glanced at me again in the rearview mirror. Not suspiciously, but curiously. You said your name is Jake, right? I nodded, trying to remain natural. And then she continued. Do you use that app? Connect me? Then yes. There was no escape. I took a deep breath and said, I do. But not very often. Megan's eyes widened, as if the penny was slowly sinking in. Do you have a profile picture? No. I never did. I think the conversation has to come before the image, you know? She was silent for 2 seconds. Then she burst out laughing. My God. It's you. I gave an awkward laugh. That was it. We were on our way to an Italian restaurant, to a date she'd made with me, without knowing it was me. And I, without knowing it was her. For a moment, the two were silent. Then she said, You could have said something sooner. And missed this turnaround? No way. The race continued, now with a completely different atmosphere. Between one traffic light and another, I started to think, how did I end up here? We arrived at the front of the restaurant. The lights were dimmed, candles on the tables, and the atmosphere was utterly romantic. A waiter at the door looked like he was first date confirmed. And there we were, the driver and passenger, who, apparently, were also a romantic couple that night. Megan looked at the facade and then at me. So, what do we do now? It was an honest question. Sincere. No pressure, no demands. Just a genuine question in a completely surreal situation. I laughed. Look, I just came to work today. But I confess this is the most random run of my life. Her, and the most fun of my week. We stood there for a few seconds, watching the hustle and bustle of the restaurant. I had my hand on the steering wheel, she had her hand on the door handle. If you want, I'll leave you here and continue racing. No problem. She frowned thoughtfully. And miss out on dinner with mysterious Jake from the app? You're kidding, right? And that's how it was. She got out, waited for me to get out of the car, and we walked into the restaurant together. Neither of us quite knew what this meant. It wasn't a regular date. It wasn't a regular race. It was something in between. Or perhaps something new. I ordered a simple dish. So did she. We talked about music, bad movies, and how small the world is, especially when technology decides to play tricks on us. The waitress, in the end, still asked, Did you meet through the app? Megan and I looked at each other and said at the same time, More or less. Dinner was great. Nothing forced, nothing pressured. It was as if they'd already experienced the awkward part of the date and now all that was left to do was relax and enjoy it. We talked for almost 2 hours. She told me about the failed dates she'd been on. I told her about the crazy passengers I'd picked up. There was laughter, there was comfortable silence, and we even shared dessert. In the end, Megan said, "Well, I think that was the most romantic run you've ever done, right?" And I replied, "Definitely the most unpredictable." The bill arrived. She tried to pay, saying I'd already done the driving and it was the least she could do. But we split it, because, somehow, it seemed the right thing to do. We left the restaurant and walked to the car. She asked if I was still going to drive that night. I said maybe yes, maybe not, depending on the weather. Her, "So, if you want to keep talking, you know where to find me." Literally. We laughed again. She got into another driver's car this time. She waved goodbye through the window and drove away. We didn't meet again after that. We exchanged a few messages, but it was clear that the story had reached its peak that night. And that was fine. But since then, every time I open the app to work, I remember. No matter how much the algorithm tries to predict everything, there are things that only chance can deliver. I've experienced crazy, tense, and scary races, but this was by far the most unusual. There was no scream, no escape, no dark mystery, just a sequence of coincidences so absurd that to this day I wonder if someone up there was having fun at my expense. The strangest thing is that, deep down, that run reminded me that the unexpected can be the best part of the day. And that sometimes the algorithm gets it right, but fate has the final say. Now I ask you, have you ever experienced a coincidence so absurd that it seemed like the universe had set it up? Leave it here in the comments, I really want to know. And of course, if you enjoyed this surreal story, leave a like, subscribe to the Backseat Secrets channel and activate the bell, because every week there's a new race, and none of them are just another trip. See you at the next race.